Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is class number 4 in our series of Yirmiyahu and Politics and Religion Clash. So in our study this far, what have we found? We have shown how God got angry because Am Yisrael basically, with everything happening, they still don't achieve their covenantal purpose to be a nation acting properly, representing God. Their society is still corrupt, even though they've returned and supposedly returned to God, but it's not enough. So after God being disappointed with this generation, all the previous generations, God sort of blows the whistle and says, I need to do something drastic to get the people to recalibrate their whole connection to God. And therefore he says in year 4 of Yehoiakim that he's made a decree that the Babylonians are going to take over the Middle East. That was chapter 25. And once he says the Babylonians are going to take over the Middle East, that's suggesting that Israel has to surrender, put up a white flag to the Babylonians. And as we'll see today, if Am Yisrael would surrender to the Babylonians, that could prevent the destruction and exile. Yirmiyahu never said there has to be destruction or there has to be exile. He's saying there will be if you don't accept Babylonian rule. And that's was the main topic we talked about. That was the politics in his prophecy. So he's giving political advice, basically saying, even though the Babylonians are coming into power, and you might think they're a dark horse, they're not going to be successful, they're nothing like Ashur was, I'm telling you, they're going to be in charge, and what God wants you to do in punishment for your lack of fulfilling your covenantal goal, that's your punishment. You have to be under foreign rule for the next 70 years. If you accept that, you can stay in your land and keep your temple. If you don't accept that, then the big punishment's going to come. So we call this a political prophecy, and that political prophecy met fierce opposition, both from the politicians we'll see and the religious leadership. Now, the political leadership being angry with that, which is understandable because they think we should fight the Babylonians, that's going to cause Yirmiyahu to have to go into hiding. We'll see about his why they want him killed. And the religious leadership, that's going to explain the false prophets because they don't accept that's true prophecy, and they accuse Yirmiyahu of being a false prophet. And the question is going to be, what's motivating his colleagues? What's motivating their claim that his prophecy is false? So in our study today, we're going to begin with the sources to highlight that opposition. First, the opposition of the priests, leading to, and basically his colleagues, the other Nevi'im, the false prophets. And then we'll see the political opposition and why they start burning books. So just a quick review to make sure we're back on the page, because we did this 3 weeks ago in the second class. This is the decree in year 4 of Yehoiakim. A quick review. Yirmiyahu's career began in the reign of Yoshiyahu with the great Shuvah. There was a great return. The Assyrians had fallen. That was the beginning of redemption. Things were going great. Temple was rebuilt. They made this big Passover when they found the Sefer Torah. And most of Yoshiyahu's reign, things were just going wonderful. The tshuva, the repentance, wasn't enough, wasn't sufficient in the eyes of the prophet, but in the eyes of the people, they thought they were doing great. They were so sure that this was a messianic time period, they take on superpower. They take on Egypt in battle, in the famous battle of Megiddo. That's where Yoshiyahu was killed tragically. His son Yehoiakim takes over after a couple months of his brother running the show. And then he's angry with God, Yehoiakim. God's angry with him. And during the reign of Yehoiakim, Yirmiyahu, who worked very well together with Yoshiyahu, Yehoiakim's father, Yehoiakim and Yirmiyahu are at each other's throats all the time, as we'll see soon. So during the 4th year of Yehoiakim, and this nevuah is important because we have not only the 4th year of Yehoiakim, it's the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar. That's year 1 of the 70 years. It's also the 1st year that he begins his conquest of the whole Middle East. He takes over Ashur, and then he doesn't take over Israel yet, but he's on his way to take over Israel. But his kingdom begins, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom begins in that year, which is the 4th year of Yehoiakim, 7 years before the temple is destroyed. Before the first wave of exile, before Nebuchadnezzar takes over the city. And here's what Yirmiyahu told the people. From year 13 of Yoshiyahu till the 31st year of Yoshiyahu, for 18 years, and another 3-4 years during Yehoiakim, it's a total of 23 years, I've been warning you, giving you rebuke, and you haven't listened. I sent not just Yirmiyahu, other Nevi'im, other prophets as well, to do proper repentance, remember? Fix your ways, your behavior, your bad behavior, and that will enable you to remain in the land that I promised your ancestors forever. But because you haven't listened to me, therefore, what's your punishment? I'm sending to the families of north, specifically the Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel. Now he's God's servant, Melech Bavel Avdi. And now he's going to take over Israel. He's going to take over the whole Middle East on this land. And I'll call Goim Ha'ileh Saviv, all the neighboring nations. And he's going to basically take them over. We'll see in a minute, is it possible to surrender or not? What can save you from the Babylonian onslaught? We'll see in a minute. But things will be so bad. We talked about. And then the big line, 70 years the Babylonians will be in power. And after 70 years, Bavel is going to fall, and they'll receive the punishment for all the things they did wrong. Now, the question is going to be, and that was a review of what we did in the previous year. This Nevuah is the 4th year of Yehoiakim. Last week, we talked about chapter 7 in Yirmiyahu, where he's in the Beit HaMikdash, telling the people if they don't fix their ways, the temple will be destroyed. Remember, Kishilo Yabayit Hazeh. Now, we're going to see today that after that Nevuah in chapter 7, we're going to date the Nevuah in chapter 7, and we're going to see what Nevuah came first, the prophecy that the temple will be destroyed, or the prophecy that the Babylonians are taking over the country. Keep that in mind. So what we're going to do now, recall last week we did chapter 7 where Yirmiyahu's main message was, if you don't fix your ways, there was the prophecy of the people coming to the temple and praying to God. It wasn't enough for prayer. Remember, God, he said, God doesn't need your sacrifices. I didn't choose you to bring me korbanot, to feed me. Rather, I want you to listen to me, obey me, keep the laws of the Torah, and build this just society. Now, in light of that Nevuah in chapter 7, for some reason, why it's not until chapter 26, we'll deal with the chronology later on, but in a story in chapter 26, we're going to find out the date for what happened in chapter 7, and we'll see why. So we're going to begin out chapter 26, and that's going to start our study today. Again, chapter 26, we want to set the date for the prophecy about the temple might be destroyed like Shiloh, and we begin as follows. Towards the beginning of the reign of Yehoiakim, Breshit Mamlechut Yehoiakim ben Yoshia melech Yehuda, Haya davar zeh meit Hashem lemor. This is in the 4th Yirmiyahu, and towards the beginning of the reign of Yehoiakim. We'll see not the first year, but within the first couple of years. Kol mar Hashem amod b'chatzer beit Hashem v'dibartet al kol arei Yehuda habayim b'shtachvo beit Hashem v'et kol advarim asher tziviticha devar elehem al tigra davar. Almost word for word we had in chapter 7. Stand at the entrance to the Beit HaMikdash. Talk to the people coming to bow down to God. Again, he's talking to people who are not idol worshippers. They're serving God, and they're coming to pray to God to save them from all the troubles, including the Babylonians. Ulai yishma'u, maybe if you give your book properly and they listen to you, maybe the people will listen. V'yashuv ish midakol hara, people will fix their ways. V'nichamti al ra asher nochi choshev lasot lem mipnei rom alehem. Then maybe I can change my mind and change my decision to bring the punishment upon them. It's a last call for the people to repent properly. He's been warning them for some 23 years, and now he's saying, this is the last call. If you don't follow me, what will happen? To listen to all the rebuke you're getting for all the Nevi'im. Pasuk Vav, v'natati et habayit hazeh kishilo, if you don't do proper repentance, as he said in chapter 7, it's word for chapter 7, then the house of God, the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, will have the same fate as Shiloh, which means it'll be destroyed. Okay? That's basically, in 6 lines, he's summarizing most of chapter 7. Now we have the story, what happened after this Nevuah. Vayishmu HaKohanim v'Hanavim, pay attention to the groups of people here. This Nevuah is given in the Beit HaMikdash, therefore the Kohanim, the priests, and the Nevi'im. Here, Yirmiyahu talking. Yirmiyahu is a well-known leader. And they don't like hearing this possibility that the temple might be destroyed. So the Kohanim and Nevi'im and all the people hear Yirmiyahu, okay? They heard Yirmiyahu's prophecy. He gets grabbed by the people. What he's saying is just goes against what everyone believes in. And they're going to charge Yirmiyahu with being a false prophet. And what do they say? The Kohanim, his colleagues, his priests, and the other Nevi'im, together with many of the people, they catch him, basically arrest him and say, we're going to put you to death. What's the charge? How could he say something so heretical that God's house might be destroyed? That God's Jerusalem could be destroyed. And everyone's gathering around him. This is like unheard of. Can't be. So the elders, the ministers of Judah hear what's going on, and they want to put him on trial. Basically, the Sanhedrin sits by the gates of the city, by the gates of Yerushalayim, and here at the gates of the Beit HaMikdash, and Yirmiyahu is going to go on trial in front of a Sanhedrin. It's official trial, and we're going to see now the results of the trial and both sides. Now we're going to hear the prosecution. The Sarim seem to be the judges, right? And what are the Kohanim and Nevi'im saying? Again, there's Yirmiyahu's colleagues who don't like what he's saying. Okay? So the Kohanim and Nevi'im, the religious leadership, is talking to the Sarim and the people, saying as follows: Mishpat mavet leish hazeh ki niba el ha'ir hazot kasher shematem bosnechem. They're not even going to quote what he says. Since you heard what he said, they're not even going to mention the temple might be destroyed. This prophet deserves to be put to death because what did he say? He predicted the temple might be destroyed. That's heretical in their eyes. Now, what's Yirmiyahu going to say in his defense? Yirmiyahu call it Sarim. They'll call him more. I'm not making it up. These are the true words of God. In other words, they're accusing Yirmiyahu of being a false prophet, an Avi Sheker. And Yirmiyahu's claiming, I'm not a false prophet. Now, how do you test a false prophet if his prophecy comes true? But Yirmiyahu is going to qualify what he said. He said, I didn't say the temple will be destroyed. I said the temple might be destroyed. On what condition? If you fix your ways, remember that's the summary of chapter 7 again. If you do justice and righteousness and take care and build a better society, if you fix your ways, okay, then God will hold back from his punishment. Yirmiyahu is claiming, I didn't say the temple will be destroyed. I'm saying the temple might be destroyed if you don't fix your ways. And therefore, you can't accuse me of being a Navi Sheker. Then he says, if you want, you can kill me. Everyone know what he's quoting from? Yirmiyahu always quotes from Sefer Devarim. Remember in chapter 6 in Devarim, chapter 6, verse 18. Several psukim after the Shema v'Ahavta Hashem Elokecha. So he says, you want to do, again, he's talking to people who are religious, and he's being tried as a heretic for predicting the possibility of the temple. If you want to bring a modern day analogy, imagine a rabbi saying up today, the state of Israel might be destroyed if we don't do proper tshuva. What do you mean? This is a final redemption. He'd be considered, he wouldn't be invited on the, for sure in the Mizrahi route, he wouldn't be able to get an invitation in the, as a speaker. What do you mean? This is the final redemption. That's why I'm giving that analogy again. I'm not saying it's the same thing today. I'm just saying that to appreciate how heretical what Yirmiyahu is saying sounds, it's like a rabbi saying today that the state of Israel is going to fall apart and we're all going to go back to exile again. So he says, you do whatever you think is right, but I'm telling you, this is the word of God. Ach yodot tedu, but you should know. If you do put me to death, if you do this is dam naki. Remember, that's exactly Parshat Shavua and Parshat Maseh. At the end of our lands of Uri Miklat, the land won't. I'll just take a quick look in case you forgot those psukim. How much the Torah is against murder of innocent people. Again, it's a little short shir on Parshat Shavua, chapter 35.
We haven't read that yet.
Yeah, no, it's coming up for everybody. You have a double parsha this week. Right? Everyone does matot and maseh this week, right? You have matot and maseh this week in America. So what's it say? It says, "V'lo tichu chofer lenefesh rotzeach." Don't take ransom money if a person deserves to be put to death for a death penalty.
Sharing
Put
the
him to
screen.
death. Okay, you don't see the screen because I didn't share my screen. No, share my screen. Share my screen, and here we go. Chapter 35 in Devarim in Bamidbar. Don't take kol for the nefesh for someone who needs to go to their miklat. Listen carefully. Don't defile the land or pollute the land that you're living in. Ki adam hu yachnif et haaretz, u'la'aretz lo yichupar l'dam asher shufach bo ki b'dam shavcho. There can't be innocent blood spilled. The land won't tolerate innocent blood. V'lo tetameh et haaretz, don't defile the land. Asher atem yoshvim ba, asher ani shocheh b'tocha. The land you're living in and dwelling in is the land that I'm dwelling with you. And if you're living in a land with me, but innocent people are put to death or killed, God can't dwell with you. Ki ani Hashem shochem b'toch b'nei Yisrael. God's saying, my Shekhinah cannot dwell with you if people don't care about human life. And if innocent people are killed and you don't put murders to death and punish them properly, God can't dwell with you in that land. So he's talking about, that's the idea of dam naki. God's saying, Yirmiyahu is telling the people, again, he's talking to religious people, if you want to kill me for this prophecy, your punishment could be terrible. And then what's he say? It's true, I'm a true prophet, God didn't make it up. Now, so that's who's talking? It says the Kohanim and the Sarim, right? Let me say the Kohanim and the Nevim to the Sarim. That's the prosecution. Some people are going to come to Yirmiyahu's defense. Who's that going to be? Some of the Sarim, some of the ministers, someone wants to name me a minister who's going to be pro-Yirmiyahu. There's a famous family of government people. In the time of Yoshio and Yehoiakim, there's a family that always comes to Yirmiyahu's help. Anyone know?
Shafan?
Exactly, the Shafan family. Gedalia ben Achikam ben Shafan, gets promoted because of that. But Achikam ben Shafan is going to save Yirmiyahu. Shafan was a Sefer, with in the time of Yoshio, found the Sefer Torah and brought it to Yirmiyahu. So the Shafan family is deep in the government. They're there, and they support Yirmiyahu, but the government is split. So some of the Sarim and some of the people tell the Kohanim and Nevim who are against Yirmiyahu, got it? Yirmiyahu's own colleagues want him dead, and some of the political people, some of the government people are on the side. He says, isn't it amazing that the Sarim, some of the ministers in the government support Yirmiyahu, and they're against, but the religious establishment doesn't want him. Okay, now to support that point, some old timers from the time of Chizkiyahu, from like really old timers, they want to bring a precedent. Micha Morashti, that's Micha from Treyasar. Hayani Babi Mei Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda. There was a prophet, famous prophet named Micha, who also predicted the temple might be destroyed in the time of Chizkiyahu. Vayomer Kol Am Yehuda Lemor Komar Hashem Tzion Tzedet Techaresh V'Yushalayim Im Tiyah Bahar Bat Lebamot Yar. Micha warned the people that the temple might be destroyed if what? If they don't do proper tshuva. So it's possible. And then he asked the question, Hemitu Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda V'Chol Yehuda? Did the Chizkiyahu and his Beitin, did they kill Micha? No. Halo Yorei Hashem, they feared God, and they prayed, Vaychalat Pnei Hashem, they prayed to God. They did proper tshuva. Vaynachem Hashem al Ashur Diber Alehem. And that's why they were saved finally from Ashur. And therefore, we're doing a terrible thing if we kill Yirmiyahu. Now, someone tell me why that's a good precedent. What's that a precedent? That what? That it's okay to say the temple might be destroyed. It's possible. But on the other hand, it can work against Yirmiyahu. Why? Because what happened? The temple wasn't destroyed. Because after Chizkiyahu, Menachem was terrible, and still the temple wasn't destroyed. Okay. Then they bring other people bring another proof. There was another prophet who prophesied in the name of God. His name was Uriah ben Shemayahu from Kiryat Yarim. And he gave a similar prophecy about Yerushalayim, just like Yirmiyahu. Melech Yokim heard about him. And what did they do? By Vakesh HaMelech Hamito, by Yishma Uriah v'Yirah v'Yivrach v'Yavo Mitzrayma. They wanted to kill him as well. He ran away to Egypt. And the king sent to Egypt and had him executed. Okay? They took Uriah out from Egypt. They brought to the king, and they killed him. Got it? So that's a proof that we can kill Nevi'ei Sheker for saying a prophecy like that. So the people were torn. Who saves Yirmiyahu? Yad Achikam ben Shaphan. That's Gedaliah from Gedaliah's father. Achikam ben Shaphan aital et Yirmiyahu v'titetu biyad ha'am lamito. One of the Sarim was in a political position, saved them from Yirmiyahu being executed immediately. But we're going to see from here, Yirmiyahu has to go into hiding. We'll prove that in a minute. Now, what I want to say is, after this prophecy, everyone agrees now that chapter 26 that we just read and chapter 7 are identical. They're the same event. Chapter 7 just talks about the warning that Shiloh, the house might have the same fate as Shiloh if they don't do proper tshuva. And afterwards, they wanted to kill him to be a false prophet. But from this point on, he's in hiding. Got it? Now, let's take a look again at chapter 25. At chapter 25, Yirmiyahu was talking in public to the people, right? In chapter 25, when Yirmiyahu talked about in the 4th year of Yehoiakim, that Nebuchadnezzar is going to come and take over the whole Middle East. Got that? He said this publicly. He didn't send this. Okay? He made this thing, and this is before he goes into hiding. So what I want to prove is that the prophecy that Bavel is going to take over and that we have to surrender to Bavel must have been given before the prophecy of Shiloh, of the temple being destroyed. Got that? You'll see why that's important in a minute. Because what I want to explain is, I want to explain why so many people want Yirmiyahu put to death. No, that's exactly my title. I'll try to explain this. If Yirmiyahu's prophecy about the Babylonians taking over, which is political, is before his prophecy that fate of the temple could be destroyed, then they're looking for an excuse to get rid of Yirmiyahu. Many prophets before weren't about destruction of the temple if they didn't do proper tshuva. Like Michal was a precedent. The question is, the accusation that Yirmiyahu is a false prophet because he said the temple might be destroyed, is that the reason or an excuse? I'll try to explain my point. What I want to claim is the reason they want to kill Yirmiyahu is because it was political prophecy. But now I need a technical excuse. The excuse is you said something heretical. What was your heresy? They're waiting for him to say something heretical. Saying the Babylonians might come and take over, okay. But saying that the temple might be destroyed, that can't be. And therefore, they want to accuse Yirmiyahu as being a false prophet, and that's going to have political ramifications. Why? Because if they can prove Yirmiyahu is a false prophet for saying the temple might be destroyed, then they don't have to accept his prophecy about the Babylonians taking over. And once he's out of there, then the political leaders who want to continue the rebellion against the Babylonians will be a lot stronger if Yirmiyahu is out of the picture. So what I want to explain is Yirmiyahu is basically a threat to the nation's security. Because what's happening? The accepted political opinion by Yehoiakim and all of his advisors is we can take on the Babylonians. They're not going to take over. We, together with the backing of Egypt and maybe the coalition of other nations in the Middle East, we can fight the Babylonians. We shouldn't give in to them. If the soldiers listen to Yirmiyahu, who says we have to give in to the Babylonians, that's going to weaken the troops and the morale. And to the very end, they're going to blame Yirmiyahu for the defeat of Israel by the Babylonians because he weakened the people's stamina to fight because he made these crazy predictions. Okay, let me check the chat real fast and we'll go back to our source sheet. Okay. Was Uriah a false prophet? Of course not. He was a true prophet. But why God didn't protect him? That's a good question. But that's a different question of why, how they got away with killing Uriah. Now back to why can't they just exile Yirmiyahu and kill him? We'll see why. Because when he goes to jail, he keeps on. He doesn't keep quiet. Yirmiyahu wishes he could be exiled. We'll see. We'll see later on. Yirmiyahu wishes he wishes he could die. He'll say he's saying things he has to say, but he doesn't want to say them. Okay, now comes the fun part, but the interesting part. So what do? We set the date for the. Now I want to prove that Yirmiyahu goes into hiding, And the main reason they want Yirmiyahu dead is because of his political prophecy. And for that, we have to go now to chapter 36. I think we're right here. Okay, chapter 36. Okay, now, as you notice, we're going to see chapter 36 is another nevuah from the 4th year of Yehoiakim, which is the same year as chapter 25, and a year after chapter 26, and the same year as chapter 27, chapter 7. You see what's going on in the book? The book's jumping all over the place chronologically. We're going to deal with that next week. Why that I might have it, but it's so complicated. The chronology of the book that I think Barbanel in his introduction says Yirmiyahu was so, disturbed by the destruction. He was just, there's no order in the book. It's just wild. I'll suggest a reason that it's in very good order. And again, this whole political background will be the key to understanding what's the order of the prophecies in Yirmiyahu. Now, this is the key chapter that explains how the book came about. So we're going to read now chapter 36, and make sure you follow this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. It's the 4th year of Yehoiakim ben Yoshia melech Yehuda. Yirmiyahu gets this nevuah. Pay attention. God tells Yirmiyahu as follows: Kach lecha Megillat Sefer. I want you to publish a book, God says to Yirmiyahu, of all your sermons from the last 20 years. Got it? Take a Megillat Sefer. וכתבת עליה את כל הדברים אשר דיברתי אליך על ישראל ועל יהודה ועל כל הגויים מיום דיברתי אליך מימי יאשיהו ועד היום הזה. Since year 13 of Yoshiao, you've been giving all these sermons, giving all this rebuke. I want you to publish it all in a book. Write a scroll. Why? אולי ישמעו בית יהודה את כל הרע אשר אנוכי חושב לעשות להם. Maybe when they hear everything together and the warning of the temple being destroyed and the Babylonians taking over, maybe what will happen? Maybe they'll do tshuva and I can forgive them for their sins. Got it? It's a last call for tshuva before it's too late. What should Yirmiyahu do now? He should write them down and publish the book. Vaikra Yirmiyahu Baruch ben Neriah. Baruch ben Neriah comes up a lot later on. He's the famous Sefer of Yirmiyahu. He's a scribe. Vaychtov Baruch ben Yirmiyahu et kol divrei Hashem asher diber elav al Megillat Sefer. Got it? We'll see later on, and if you learn Hilchot Stam, the laws of writing a Sefer Torah, many laws we learn from Baruch, how Baruch writes down the words of Yirmiyahu. So Yirmiyahu tells Baruch, I want you to publish, and he tells him what to write. Summary of all his nevuot. Vaytzaveh Yirmiyahu Baruch lemor. Pasuk. Ani etzur lo uchal lavo Beit Hashem. It's saying, I'm being held back, which means he's in hiding. I can't go public and come to the Beit HaMikdash. In other words, this nevuah has to be after his prediction that the temple might be destroyed. It's after he's in hiding. Got it? So he can't be seen in public, but he can write down his prophecies, and Baruch's going to read it in public for him. And he tells Yirmiyahu as follows: Ubata ata v'krat et hamgilah asher katavta mipi et divrei Hashem b'oznei ha'am. I want you, Baruch, to go to the Beit HaMikdash. I can't go there because I'll be arrested. But you go there, take this Megillah and read it there in public, b'oznei ha'am, in God's house, Beit Hashem, b'yom tzom, v'gam b'oznei kol Yehuda ba'im barim tikraim. Read these prophecies on a fast day when everyone's coming to the temple to pray to God. Now, what fast days are talking about? How many fast days are there in the time of Yirmiyahu before the temple is destroyed? There's no Shiva B'Tammuz yet. There's no Asar B'Tevet. We don't have the 4 fast days yet because the temple isn't destroyed yet. Got it? Could it be Yom Kippur?
Yeah,
It can't be Yom Kippur. So does anyone know of any fast days? It's not Tanis Esther. She wasn't born yet. We're not in Persia yet.
A rain fast?
Exactly. Okay. When times of rain, remember, it's a mitzvah to fast when you're in trouble. And the classic time when people fast, it's Masechet Tanit, has all the details. If it doesn't rain in Cheshvan, you start fasting in Kislev. Okay. Maybe if they pray to God properly, and people do proper tshuva, God might change his plan and not bring destruction. That's what Yirmiyahu says. He comes to the Beit HaMikdash. Now, okay, it's been several months now. Got it? It's now in the 5th year to Yehoiakim ben Yoshia ben Yehuda. B'chodesh HaTshi'i, got it? 9th month, which means what? That's exactly the time when people fast for rain. 9th month now is Kislev. There's a national fast day, a public fast day decreed by the people in Yerushalayim, most likely to pray for rain or to pray to save them from Bavel. But the people are coming to Beit HaMikdash to pray to God because Israel's in a terrible predicament. What does Baruch do? Everyone's gathered in the fast day. Baruch, everyone knows, is Yirmiyahu's Sefer. He reads in public, where? V'lishkat Gemariyahu ben Shafan. That's safe territory. Got it? See the Shafan family again? Achikam's brother, Gemariyahu ben Shafan. By the way, we find a lot of bule in the excavations in Near David, and some of these Shafan family members, we find their seals in the archaeological digs from the end of the First Temple period. So Yirmiyahu's book is read by Baruch ben Neriah in Shafan's office. Okay, he's a sofer. B'chatzer Elyon, in the upper courtyard of the temple. Petach Shar Beit Hashem HaChadash B'osnei Kol Ha'am. Right where Yirmiyahu's trial took place, right nearby. That's where he's reading now this thing in public. Got it? He's getting an audience. Vayishma Michael ben Gemariyahu ben Shafan et Kol Divrei Hashem be'al Sefer. See the family now? Gemariyahu's son Michael, Shafan's grandson now, probably a younger child. Here's what's going on. And he's got to not tattletale. He's got to tell the story to his father. Okay. Vayered Beit HaMelech. He goes to the political office of the king. El Lishkat HaSofer. Hinei sham kol hasarim yeshvim. There's a government ministers meeting going on. Okay. And who's there? Elishama HaSofer, Utalel ben Shmayahu, Vechanan ben Achbor, Gemariyahu ben Shafan, V'tzikeh ben Chananya, V'chol hasarim. In other words, remember Gemariyahu ben Shafan? So Baruch's reading his work outside his office, but Gemariyahu's not there. He's at a government meeting. There's a cabinet meeting going on discussing policy. Gemariyahu's son, Michael, remember, goes and tattletales to his father what's going on. Okay. Vaygela Michael again, Gemariyahu's son, tells his father, "Et kol advarim asher shama b'kol Baruch b'sefer b'osnei am." And he starts telling them, hey, Baruch's reading all these words of Yirmiyahu in front of the people. So everyone in the government meeting hears about it. Vayishluchu kol hasarim el Baruch, et Yehudi ben Netanya ben Shemayahu ben Kushi lemor, hamgila asher karata ba b'osnei am kechenu betcha v'lech. Says, that Megillah you're reading, get it out of here. Got it? Take it, got it? V'yikach Baruch ben Neriah hamgila b'yado v'yavo alehem. He says, don't you dare read this in public. Come first to the government office, and we want to censor and see what you're about to say. Now, there's nothing wrong with telling the people to fix their ways, to do tshuva. But the question is, what is it in what Yirmiyahu is writing? What is it in what Baruch's reading from Yirmiyahu's works? What is it that's going to get the government meeting, the ministers, angry? And why can't it be read in public? Okay. V'imru elav, shef navakrena boznenu vayikra Baruch boznehem. So they call Baruch in, and before he continues reading in public in the Beit HaMikdash, they want to hear what he's going to say in the ministers' meeting. If they say keep Shabbos, that's fine. If they want to say be kind and be nice, fine. Keep Taras Mishpacha, fine. But we'll see in a minute, if there's anything political, then that can be read in public. Listen carefully. Pasuk Tezayin. Vahi kashamam et kol advarim pachadu. When the ministers in the government meeting heard what Baruch was reading, they all became fearful. Ishareu, v'emru Baruch haged nagid lemelech et kol advarim ha'ela. And they told Baruch, should we tell the king all these things you're writing? But Baruch sholu lemor. Before they go to the king with this, they ask Baruch as follows: Haged nalanu, ech ketavta advarim ha'ela mipiv. How did you write this? Is this your summary? Is this word for word the words of Yirmiyahu? Is this what you think? Are these your ideas? They want to know, is this like the summary of the shir Yirmiyahu gave? Is this your own ideas, or is this word for word the words of Yirmiyahu? And this is a famous line that everyone who learns Safrut, who learns how to be a Jewish scribe, learns. He read it out loud to me, et kol dvarim eleh v'ani kotev al sefer b'dio, and I have to write it down with ink. And therefore, when a sofer writes a sefer Torah, we have to use ink, and we have to read out loud before you write down the word. We have many laws about what's called safrut, the laws for a scribe who writes the sefer Torah. We learn from these psukim. Now, you guys better go hide. Which sarim are these? These are the pro-Yirmiyahu sarim who know that they're a minority in the government. Remember, people from the Shafan family. In other words, the king is not at this meeting. The ministers are meeting, and they hear what's going on, and they know the king's going to find out about this sooner or later. And the people in the government meeting who have a bit of a sympathy for Yirmiyahu and Baruch, they tell Baruch, you better go hide, because again, what you're saying here is seditious. You're going to get in trouble. Okay. Now we have to see in a minute what's in it. They told the king what's going on, and the king wants to hear what's going on. So the king sends one of his men named Yehudi to take the Megillah. The king, with his ministers, we'll see they're more the anti-Yirmiyahu group. They want to hear what Yirmiyahu is writing in his book, and Yehudi reads it aloud in front of the king. It's, remember, 9th month, it's cold outside, and he has a heater there. So it's the 9th month. The ach is the heater, I guess putting wood in, heating up the room. So there's a furnace providing heat in the room, and they're reading it out loud. And this is the famous line, as Yehudi would read 3 or 4 lines, stanzas of Yirmiyahu's prophecy, what did the king do? The king ripped it with a knife. What did they do? They read it in public, and basically in a brazen manner, they took it line by line, or 3 lines at a time, ripped it, and threw it in the fire. As opposed to what happened some 20 years later, in the 18th year of Yoshiel, when they found the Sefer Torah in the Mikdash, and when Yoshiel heard the words of read by Shafan, remember, it's the previous generation has the same characters. Remember, Shafan was a Sefer. Now it's Gemariah ben Shafan, and the king then was Yoshiel. Now the king is Joachim ben Yoshiel, his son. There they were poched, and they ripped their clothes and they did shuvah. Now the opposite. They were not fearful. They didn't rip their clothes. It didn't impact them at all. In fact, they got angry. And some of the sarim put up a protest. They protested to the king, not to burn the Megillah, but the king didn't listen to them. The word was given to arrest Baruch, the Sefer, and Yirmiyahu, Hanavi. They're back into hiding again. Right? They're told to go into hiding, and the king wants them caught, and God enables them to hide. So we see now Yirmiyahu and Baruch have to be in hiding now. Now, the question is, what is it in the book that got the king so angry? And this is going to be the key to everything we're doing. Listen carefully now. After they burnt his book, God spoke to Yirmiyahu and says, I want you to republish. Okay? Take another one. Get a new version. Okay? Write a new version of it. Now listen carefully. About the fate of Joachim, the king of Judah, say the following. Kol Mar Hashem, this is the word of God. Listen carefully. You burnt this Megillah saying what? Listen what the king is saying when they read the Megillah. Madua katavta aleh lemor, bo yavo melech Bavel v'shchit haaretz hazot v'yishbit mimena adam u'beima. Can read that again? This is the key. Why is the king want Yirmiyahu dead? And why is the king so angry about what Yirmiyahu is saying? What is it that makes this Megillah so seditious? What nevuah Yirmiyahu is saying that the political leaders are so much against? What's he say? You burnt this Megillah, and when you burnt it, what were you saying? Why did you write in it saying, Bo yavo melech Bavel v'shchit et haaretz hazot, that the king of Babylon is going to come and destroy this land and wipe out from it, man and animal. In other words, the prediction of chapter 25, got it? That Bavel is going to take over. That's what got the king angry. Therefore, Yakim is not going to have a successor, and he's going to die in battle. We'll see later on. And he's going to get punished for all the things he did, for all the bad that he said about Yerushalayim. And Yirmiyahu takes another Sefer and writes a new Megillah. We'll talk about this later on. And he writes a new one. Everything Yoakim burnt, he writes it. And then V'od Nasaf Alem Dvarim Rabim. We'll see that's going to be, we'll see in a minute, that the core of Yirmiyahu will be this Megillat Sefer. Notice, I need to look in Yirmiyahu for a list of prophecies from the time of the 13th year of Yoshio until the 4th year of Yehoiakim as the core book, ending with the Nevuah of Kishilo Yabayit Hazeh, which would be chapters 2 through 7, we'll see probably through 10. There has to be a Megillat Sefer with the early works of Yirmiyahu, and then once that's written, there are going to be some add-ons to it. So this pasuk here, pasuk Lamed Bet, is going to be the background for how the book of Yirmiyahu developed. There's the core book, which is all of his prophecies from year 13 of Yoshio to year 4 of Yehoiakim, the book that was burnt and republished, and then there'll be some additions to it. Now, what do we see from here? What we see from here is clear, that what gets the king angry is the political nature of Yirmiyahu's prophecy. Got it? If Yirmiyahu only said keeping Shabbos, even if he said the temple might be destroyed if you don't do justice and righteousness, fine. But it's his decision that what? It's his prophecy that Bavel is going to take over, which means what? Which means surrender to the Babylonians and don't fight. That's political. And that's going to hurt the troops. Because when the accepted opinion of the government and the people is to fight the Babylonians, you can't have a prophet or rabbi going around telling the people don't fight the Babylonians. No. It sounds like I might be reading between the lines here a little bit, but I think it's quite clear. But when we go back now, we'll read now chapter 27, and we'll see in the time of Tzidkiel, what I said is crystal clear, 100%. You can't argue with it. It's explicit. Because Yirmiyahu didn't say the Babylonians are going to come and destroy the temple and the city. It's possible to surrender. And that's going to be his Nevuah. We'll see this in chapter 27. So let me just summarize before we get to chapter 27. In chapter 27, I want to prove to you that what? That there's a possibility that the temple won't be destroyed. There's a possibility that we won't go into exile. On what condition? That we surrender to Bavel. If we don't surrender to Bavel, then the temple will be destroyed. And then the people might have to go into exile. But if we give in to Bavel, destruction can be prevented. But what can't be changed is Babylonian sovereignty. Now, remember, chapter 25 was the nevuah of the 7 years of Babylonian rule, starting in 4th year of Yehoiakim. Chapter 26 was a trial of what? Of Yirmiyahu for saying Kishelo Yabayit Hazeh, and now we understand the juxtaposition of the two. Because why was he put in trial? Because of his nevuah of chapter 25, they want to kill him in chapter 26. Hope that's clear. That was my chiddush, what I'm trying to get across, is that chapter 25 is his political nevuah, which he says publicly. In chapter 26, when he says the temple might be destroyed, they want to kill him for heresy, for saying that. What I want to claim is they want to kill him for heresy as an excuse. The real reason is they want to kill him for his political prophecy. And how do we prove that? When he writes all these nevuot later on, when he's in hiding, after they accuse him of heresy and they want to kill him as a false prophet for saying the temple might be destroyed, he goes into hiding. In hiding, he writes the Megillat Sefer, which is read in public in year 5. And when the king burns the books and wants him arrested, and he Embarach, it's crystal clear the reason why the king wants them all arrested is because of not because he says the temple will be destroyed, because he said the Babylonians, Bavel is going to come and take over the city. Now, therefore, the next chapter, 27, is going to explain and going to clarify what was this decree of Babylonian rule. It's not that Babylonians are going to destroy your city. They might destroy your city if you don't surrender, but if you surrender, you can be saved. And listen to the double header. Okay. Breshit Mamlechet Yokim ben Yoshiel Melech Yehuda Hayad Davar Ze Yirmiyahu Meit Limor. This Nevuah was given early in the reign of Yoakim. We'll see again, year 4 or 5. We'll see in a minute. But we're going to see it's going to be repeated during the reign of Tzidkiyahu. Now, Tzidkiyahu took over, just to review the history. Yoakim rebels against the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar comes in year 11 and wipes him out. It seems like Yoakim must have died in battle. He's definitely gone. His son Yoachin takes over, and he's king for 3 months. And we'll see Yoachin actually listens to Yirmiyahu and surrenders, puts up a white flag, and that saves the city. We'll talk about that next week when we talk about the destruction of Yerushalayim. When the Babylonians take over after Yoachin, Yoachim's son, surrenders, then the temple is not destroyed, and only a small group goes into exile. The political leaders and the army people, and we'll see the important people, but most of the people stay behind in the city. Tzidkiyahu is made king, and he's supposed to be under Babylonian rule. What's going to happen in year 5 of Tzidkiyahu, they're going to rebel again against the Babylonians. That's going to be it. Now, this nevuah is going to be given first during the time of Yoakim, and it's going to be repeated during the time of Tzidkiyahu, because what's common, both during the reign of Yoakim and during the reign of Tzidkiyahu, God's telling the king, don't rebel against the Babylonians, accept their sovereignty. How does he say that? Kol Mar Hashem Pasuk Bet. Now, if you're familiar with farming, you have what's called an ox, and an ox is going to plow a field. But for the ox to plow the field, you need to attach a plow to the ox. What's going to attach the plow to the ox? So the yoke, the yoke goes over the neck, and mosrot the motot, those are bars and bands, are going to connect the yoke to the plow. Got it? So Yirmiyahu is going to walk around with a yoke with bars and bands connected to it. He's going to walk around like basically like an ox plowing a field. He says, make them. What do we see here? All the neighboring countries are sending emissaries to Tzidkiyahu, the king of Judah, planning a revolt or planning a resistance against the Babylonians. We have here the whole Middle East. Edom is to our east, to the southeast. Moab to the east. Melech ben Ammon also to the east. It's basically it's all Transjordan. Sor and Sidon is to the north. We're all backed by Egypt to the west. Got it? All these kings are coming to Yerushalayim, to Tzidkiyahu, planning the resistance to the Babylonians. They're coming, planning a revolt. I want you to give a message from God. Here's what you tell your master. Okay? The opening line, God says, I'm the creator of heaven and earth. Okay, I did it with my great strength and my outstretched hand, and I've given the land to whoever I see fit. We'll return to this pasuk in a minute. Again, what's God saying? I, the God who created heaven and earth, I made the land, it belongs to me. I'm giving the land to whoever I think deserves it. And now I decided this land is going to be under the sovereignty of Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel. For the next 70 years, he, his son, and his grandson are going to be in control of this land. Okay? And now listen carefully. We'll go back again to Pasuk in a minute. Okay, listen. There's any nation that doesn't submit to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, who doesn't put his head into his neck under the yoke of Melech Bavel, he'll be finished. Meaning what? If you accept the yoke of Bavel, you can be saved. If you don't accept the yoke of Bavel, you'll be killed. Now listen carefully. Don't listen to your prophets and your sorcerers and your dreamers, etc. Okay? All the advisors, all the prophets from all the countries are all saying, we can fight the Babylonians. And the consensus among all the political leaders of the Middle East at the time is that Babylonians are not going to, Nebuchadnezzar is not strong enough to take over. And if we put up a joint front, we can defeat him. And that's all the advice they're getting from all the prophets, not just in Israel, from other countries as well. Ki sheker nibim lachem, okay? It's false. It's going to cause you to lose your land. Don't listen to those false prophets. On the other hand, any nation that accepts the yoke of Bavel, if you want to stay in your land and live peacefully and quietly, put up a white flag to Bavel. Now, it's everything I was just alluding to before, it's explicit. How about Yehuda? The same thing I told Tzidkiel, the king of Yehuda. Put yourself under the yoke of the king of Bavel, serve him and stay alive. Lama tamutu, why should you die in your nation? By sword, by famine, etc. That will happen to any nation that doesn't accept Babylonia. And again, don't listen to the false prophets who are saying in God's name, not to serve Bavel. They're false prophets. Listen carefully. I didn't send them. They're saying political prophecies in my name that are false. They're not true. And that's going to lead you astray, and that's how you're going to lose everything. And then he tells the Kohanim, the religious leaders who are working with the Nevi'im. I told you. The false prophets are not saying given to Bavel, to fight Bavel. They're saying what? The worst is over, and Yehoiachin's coming back with the vessels of the temple that were destroyed. Okay? He says, don't listen to them. Serve Melech Bavel. Why should the city be destroyed? Let me stop the share for a minute. I want to make sure it's all clear. Okay. You see what I'm getting at? I see in chapter 27 in the Nevuah, which we'll see in a minute, is in year 5 of the rebellion against the Babylonians starts in year 5 of Tzidkiel. That rebellion, Yirmiyahu is trying to stop. But we see that the same thing Yirmiyahu told Tzidkiel in year 5 is the same thing he told Yehoiakim in year 5 of Yehoiakim. That what? God's prophecy of Babylonian control over the Middle East for the next 70 years, that can't be changed. And if you want the temple not to be destroyed, if you want not to go into exile, if you want to stay in your land, all you need to do is surrender to the Babylonians. That's the political prophecy. And you have a choice: surrender, stay in your land. If you fight the Babylonians, what'll happen? You're going to lose. You'll go into exile and the temple will be destroyed. It's your choice. Now, when the people hear that, no one wants to accept it. Now, if the people hear this prophecy, what'll happen? They won't join the army, but they won't join the effort. Got it? And that's what makes Yirmiyahu public enemy number 1. Got it? If a Navi says do tshuva, be kind to the poor, fine. The Navi says keep Shabbos, don't speak Lashon Hara. Okay, they're not going to kill him for that. Everybody's been saying that. This prophecy of Yirmiyahu, got it from chapter 25, that the Babylonians are taking over, and that's your punishment for decades of not listening to God properly, especially when the people think they were listening to God properly. Remember? They think they're fine because they're bringing sacrifices and they're worshiping God in the temple. They just don't buy what Yirmiyahu is saying. And that's the tragedy of the book of Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu is told by God to give a prophecy, a punishment, which is basically political, but there's a religious reason for the political punishment. The people see Yirmiyahu as being paid by the European Union, or being paid by the Babylonians to weaken the troops. And to save the people from this evil idea, they have to accuse Yirmiyahu of being a false prophet to save Klal Yisrael. Got it? And when you're sure that you're right, you'll make up a prophecy in God's name. When you're sure that Yirmiyahu's colleagues, I want to understand these false prophets. Yirmiyahu's colleagues are sure that he's wrong. Because how could it be that we're fine? We're so firm, we're so religious. This is the beginning of our redemption. They're so sure that this is redemption now. The worst is over. Yirmiyahu must be wrong. But people might listen to him because he's a popular prophet from before. And therefore, to counter Yirmiyahu, they have to say things in God's name that God never said. And they know God didn't say it. But for the sake of the people, because they know Yirmiyahu is wrong, they have to counter Yirmiyahu. And they have to say, God told us exactly the opposite. And they promise the people everything will be fine on the condition you come and pray in the temple. And that's the Eichal Hashem. Remember, Yirmiyahu's making fun. They're saying Eichal Hashem, Eichal Hashem. And Yirmiyahu's saying, no, people fix your ways. And no one wants to listen to Yirmiyahu because he's giving. No one wants to be under foreign rule. And when the political establishment and the whole Middle East supported by Egypt, wants to take on the Babylonians. And the Babylonians, again, are a dark horse. No one expected them to be so powerful. Ashur, that was our first class. Ashur was so powerful, they fell apart. Everyone's so happy, Ashur fell apart. Assyria is gone. No one thought the Babylonians were going to be like them, and they weren't very strong. They lasted some 20, 30 years. I mean, they were in power for 7 years over Israel, but they were nowhere nearly as powerful as the Assyrians were, or later as the Persians became later on. They're a dark horse. No one wanted to believe it at all. And that's the tragedy of the book. Now, one thing is really interesting, which maybe we'll talk about next week a little bit, is that we'll see next week that the rebellion, I'll get to Rachel's question in a minute. This rebellion against the Babylonians is like so popular. Everyone wants it to happen. And it's supported by the political leaders and the religious leaders, the Kohanim in the temple. And all the rabbis and all the prophets are saying, we can defeat them. On what condition? That we pray and everyone works together on it. Again, when Yirmiyahu is going to tell the people, if you want to stay alive, join the enemy. Right? He's the biggest danger to the people. We'll see later, he hates his prophecy. He wishes he didn't have to say it, because he wishes it wasn't true. We'll say later on, but he's forced to say it. He'd rather die than say it, he'll say. He prays that God will kill him already. But God makes him say it. Now, that idea, what I'm trying to explain is, this is the background. And during the first 4 years of Tzidkiyahu's reign, he's subservient to Bavel. We're going to see that God's decision that Jerusalem is finished is going to take place as soon as Tzidkiyahu and his government decides to begin the rebellion against Bavel and not listen to Yirmiyahu. That's in year 5. That's when the Shekhinah leaves Yerushalayim. That's when you look at the book of Yechezkel. There's a big question. Yechezkel's big nevuah, when he sees God's chariot, that big famous vision, which everyone talks about the vision he saw. People don't pay attention to the date. Yechezkel's first nevuah in Bavel is not on year 1 when he arrives. It's not on year 9 or 10 or 11 when the temple is being destroyed. It's in year 5. Why is the Shekhinah living in year 5? What's this bombastic vision? Because exactly when the people decide to rebel against the Babylonians, that's when God, it's a lost cause. Got it? The date of the opening parak of Yechezkel, and that's why Yechezkel doesn't see God, he sees his chariot moving with wheels, leaving. God's chariot leaving Yerushalayim and landing in Bavel. Whoa, that's a bombshell to the people in Bavel. What do we see here? The prophets are saying, not only are we going to defeat the Babylonians, the first wave of exile is coming back. And some of the vessels that were taken in the first wave of exile are going to return to the temple. The worst is over. Got it? So you see that background, and Yechezkel has to get their hopes down. And it's exactly when the people in Yerushalayim decide to rebel against the Babylonians. God says it's a lost cause. It's not going to work. They don't listen. So that's why year 5, and that's why the opening parak in Yechezkel is so important. We'll see more of it later on when we get to Yirmiyahu chapter 28 next week, and how the temple was finally destroyed. One last thing. Let me go back to the source sheet, and then we'll get to chat. Okay, we'll go over the dates in a second. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Tova Gonzo is giving a class on some of these overlapping issues. Okay, I'm not sure. Did she explain the reason for year 5?
Yes, she said just what you said. Similar.
It's because that's when the rebellion started.
And that's when the Shekhinah left. When it was a foregone conclusion by that point.
But because of the rebellion against the Babylonians. Mm-hmm. Not because it's a political decision by the people. Switched it, yeah. Now back to but you only know that when you read Yirmiyahu, but we'll get to year 5 next week. I was hoping to get
that the building was an empty shell.
Yeah, the temple wasn't. God left the temple, and therefore the Babylonians could destroy it. Now, okay, we talked about the order of the reason. So again, let me look at the questions, and I'll just review it real quick. I know we're over time, and I think I just stopped my share. 1 second, stop share. Okay, stop share and chat. Okay, chat up to. Okay, why can't they just exile Yirmiyahu? Okay, that's a good question. But if the exile, he might come back. I mean, he is sort of in exile already, but he might come back. It's just safer to kill him. Okay, Yom Kippur is not the fast day because it was the 9th month, not the 7th month. Is Michaj ready to Shafan, who likes Yirmiyahu? Why? It's his son. He's telling him what's going on because he's afraid. He wants to protect Baruch from being killed. He knows what's going to happen. He goes to Gemaria's father, say, but Baruch's saying is seditious. They might come and arrest him, so he wants to maybe tell them to save him. That's why he tells him, come and read it by us and see what's really in there. And then he gets to the king. Okay, no, Michia is not tattletaling. Maybe I shouldn't say tattletale. He's not in a negative way. He's doing it to protect them. Okay, who put Joachim on the throne in the first place? Paro, of course. Never said that was the point we talked about last week. Is that Joachim's whole rights to power was because he taxed the Am Haaretz. He was angry with the people making his brother king. And when Egypt came back, they made Joachim king because he collected the money for them. He was supported by Pharaoh. Of course, he sides with Pharaoh and goes against Bavel. That was first thing. Why is Tzidkiel mentioned as a king? Oh, so that's Ellen's question is basically the first chapter of. Let me go back here and share the screen. This question all the Parshanim have, and I'm suggesting a reason for it now. If I look in Yirmiyahu chapter, where are we? The opening lines of Yirmiyahu chapter. I should just get my Tanakh open. In chapter 27, I'll close the chat. You see the screen, I hope? Okay. This nevuah happens in the beginning of the reign of Joachim, which we see is year 4 or 5 beforehand. Okay. And in the chapter, what do we find? We find Tzidkiel. So my suggestion is this nevuah of putting yourself under the yoke of Bavel was first said during the reign of Joachim, which makes perfect sense now because it's the same message. And it's repeated now in the 5th year of Tzidkiel, when they're rebelling. It's a nevuah given twice, when both rebellions are beginning against the Babylonians, first in the reign of Joachim and later in the reign of Tzidkiel. Now, this line here of, what do you call it? I did the heavens and the earth, when I want to show you something interesting. Rashi quotes this pasuk. I'm sure, remember the first Rashi in Chumash? Rashi had a great question in Chumash. Why start Bereshit? Why start Chumash? Start with HaChodesh Hazeh. So what does he say? How do the Zionists teach that? Chumash begins, we need to know the land of Israel belongs to us, right? They don't realize the pasuk Rashi is quoting. What pasuk is Rashi quoting? Take a look. Here. Rashi quotes, okay, why do we open with Bereshit? Mishum koach masa v'gid lama, pasuk from Tehillim 101, which is very similar to the pasuk we had in Yirmiyahu, b'kol chayad gadol b'zon tu, yeah? Shimra umato olam lisod listimatem. If we're accused, we're stealing our land. You took land that doesn't belong to you. Okay. What did we tell them? The land belongs to God. Got it? The land belongs to God. He created it. Hubra. That's Bereshit. Untana l'asher yashar beinav. That's our parak, isn't it? That's Yirmiyahu. God gave it to them, and He took it for them and gave it to us. But what's that mean? The land doesn't belong to us; it belongs to God. And the pasuk Rashi's quoting is the pasuk where God takes it from us and gives it to the Babylonians. Got it? So why do I need Sefer Bereshit? To know the land doesn't belong to us. It's our responsibility to live and keep God's laws on it. It's a challenge, a responsibility. But Rashi's saying the book begins in Bereshit with the land of Canaan belonging to other nations, and God taking away from them for their bad behavior, giving tests to do better, but warning if we act the way they did, He'll take it away from us again. That's explicit in Vayikra Yotchet. It's explicit in Menachem Bet Perach Aleph that we saw in the Gzar Din and time of Menachem. And what Rashi's saying is almost exactly the opposite of what's usually misunderstood. Rashi's saying Chumash begins with Bereshit to know the land doesn't belong to us; it belongs to God, and we have it on only for the purpose of keeping God's land, keeping God's laws, and sanctifying God by living on it. If we do a lousy job, they have to throw us out, but it's always ours as a destiny. One day we'll return there, but we always have to be worthy of keeping it, which is a reason to start the book from Bereshit. Let me just finish up the chat. I'm way over time. Where are we here? Stop the share and finish the chat. Chat. Where are we? All these. Okay. If there are all these Nevi'im, why couldn't Hashem send them all consistent Nevuah? Okay. That's the question. Rachel's question is why, if this is why is he allowing all these Nevi'im to give false prophecies? We'll see next week. I'll talk about this also. It's a good topic for Tisha B'Av. Is what's called people go to prophets. People listen to prophecies they want to hear. I don't want to get into politics, but how do you become a popular prophet? Say what people want to hear, even though it's not true. Got it? And the people get what they deserve. We'll see. Cheskel will say, "Kavon hanavi, kavon hadoresh." Okay, the Nevi'im are responsible, right? Because they're saying prophecy people want to hear, not what they need to hear, but what they want to hear. But the people responsible for asking Nevi'im, asking for the prophecies they want to hear. Listen, it says the people want to hear, we're going to win the wars. These Nevi'im become popular because they're saying what people want to hear, not what they need to hear. And if they learn Chumash properly, they would know that Yirmiyahu is right. And it's we'll see that in Yechezkel later on. Please go over the timeline again. Okay, I know it's complicated. I purposely not quoting years, but I'm only quoting kings. Got it? There's year 13 to 31 of Yoshiyahu. Got it? Followed by the 11 years of Yehoiakim, followed by 11 years of Tzidkiyahu. Got that? It's on the source sheet of the first 2 weeks also. I have the whole timeline. And then Yoachim goes into exile after Yehoiakim, before Tzidkiyahu, for a couple months. I mean, he's king for 3 months and puts up an exile. We'll talk about that next week of how the temple is destroyed. Yeah, what happens with the first wave of exile? What happens in the next wave of exile? Okay, Karkemish again is the key. That's true. Yirmiyahu, when the battle of Karkemish, when Egypt lost that battle, but it was 3-4 years after Yoshiel, tried to meet him in Megiddo. It took a while till they lost there, but that was the turnaround event. But again, that didn't mean that they're going to take over the whole Middle East. That was one victory. On hindsight, we know it was a turning point. But during Yoachim's reign, there was a good chance that they would fall again. Already. Okay. Anyway, everyone have a good week. And I guess I'll make all the announcements. There was an email with all the shurim this week. I think I'm running the whole thing myself today. It was good. I didn't have to use the mute on anybody today. That was good. And you see why we picked this topic for the 3 weeks. I hope I'm not overlapping too much. Is this overlap too much with Tova's class or not?
No, it's good.
It's very good. It reinforces it. It's terrific.
Okay. And then
Great.
maybe when I'm bored this week, I'll listen to I'll listen and see what their overlap is, what they're doing. I'm not sure if everyone in this class listens to that class also, so we'll see. Anyway, everyone have a good week, and check your email for the rest of the schedule. Okay, bye-bye.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, question, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the famous keynote that we say unteachable where the and I don't know what the timing is or anything about the army going into the houses and not realizing that the idols in the houses because they're on the doors. I'm sure you know.
Yeah, that's the one from Yoshiel. Now, those keynote, there's a beautiful keynote from the time of Yoshiel. I think maybe we'll do that on Tisha B'Av also. When we do the Haftar from Tisha B'Av, I'll do the keynote about Yoshiel. It's a beauty. I mean, it's sad. Right? But what that midrash is saying, I'll explain the medrash that Marty's talking about. But when Yoshiel was doing tshuva, remember those from year 13 to year 31 was a big tshuva movement? It didn't work. The king was good, but the people weren't with him. Now, what I tried to explain was the tshuva was nationalistic and not religious. It wasn't, they were returning to God because Ashur had fallen. It was a return to nationalism, and there was nationalism that went hand in hand with religion, but it wasn't proper religion. And what the Medrash is saying, when they went around checking for idol worship door to door, so everyone cleaned their house of idol worship, but they kept it behind the door. So when you open the door, you didn't see it. When you close the door, it was back inside again. It's a midrashic way of saying, it's not an historical one. It's a midrashic way of saying the tshuva was phony. If we have time, we only have 6 weeks. If we had 20 weeks for Yirmiyahu, I would do it. It's basically that midrash is chapter 4 in Yirmiyahu. He says your tshuva is phony, he tells them. Yeah?
I want to ask a specific question. When you say that the sins were political, you're sort of assuming that the national policy was the sins that brought down the base of Megiddo. Were they national in terms of what the government was doing, not doing
Yeah,
it.
again, we'll see this. We have tons of stuff to do. Over this weekend on Tisha B'Av, next weekend on Tisha B'Av, the week after, we'll see what Yirmiyahu is complaining about is that when you have a movement which is more nationalistic than religious, but religion is a tool of nationalism. There's something negative about nationalism. It's wonderful. But God wants us to use our national strength, our national entity, okay, to sanctify God and the type of society that we build. But when the main goal is having sovereignty, nationalism, and not building a just society, but now that working and then when the people running the country, when the rich get wealthier and take advantage of the poor, and there's corruption and lying and cheating, etc., and especially within the temple again, same thing happened with Shiloh with the Kohanim there. That's when God says, "What good was all this return? What good was this redemption movement if you weren't fixing your core values that brought down the temple in the first place?" Okay. Again, we'll have to. I gotta stop. I got Menachem now in a minute, so we'll stop here. But all these topics will come up next week. We'll deal with all those questions next week and the week after. Okay, everyone have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.